First of all, thank you for the opportunity to participate to this webinar. Also on behalf of the co-authors, Evelien Segers and Jorijn Nering. I am Evdokia Tsakiridis. I work at the NGO Workshop Intangible Heritage Founders, situated in Belgium. And I will briefly take you through the article, the contribution we have written, which is called At the Interface Between Living Heritage and Museum Practice, Dialogical Encounters and the Making of a Third Space in Safeguarding Heritage. It was based upon our experiences from the IJIH and Museum project, in which we collaborated with 5 NGOs in Europe, and which was funded by the Creative Europe program of the European Union and the Flemish government. We were supported by the IJIH NGO Forum, ICOM International, and the Network of European Museum Organizations. So in the complex web of different actors and processes that come into view in the dynamics around safeguarding intangible heritage, museums occupy a special place. They offer a space, either physical or metaphorical, where heritage practices can be studied, strengthened, and communicated to a wider audience. At the same time, the interaction between communities, groups, and individuals that practice or cherish intangible heritage and museums also bring about many challenges. Between 2017 and 2020, the Intangible Cultural Heritage and Museums Project has attempted to tackle a range of these issues, but also uncover windows of opportunities coming about where living heritage and museums meet. One of the guiding principles behind the project was the UNESCO 2003 Convention, which has, generally speaking, shifted the focus away from solely preserving built heritage, objects, monuments, towards also safeguarding skills, expressions, and the knowledge of people. The participation and active involvement of these communities, groups, and individuals, such as its ever-changing nature, are visualized here in this image. These characteristics have been adopted as a reference framework in which all actions and events, outcomes and outputs of the project would be conceived. The context in which we worked was that of European museum practice and policy. And in our article, we present to readers with a brief overview of some of its central features. In a very generalizing manner, we could say that the core functions of museums could be summarized still as acquiring and conserving, scientific research, and communicating and exhibiting collections of artifacts that are in their care. But today, several additional tasks are laid in the hands of museums, from playing a role with regard to social functions, well-being, education, etc. And more recently, attention of museums is also being drawn towards hot and sensible topics, such as restitution and decolonization of collections, in response to current questions and expectations in society. At the onset of the project, we distinguished some formal incentives for museums to engage with IJIH and its practitioners. From the very ICOM definition of museums that includes a reference to intangible heritage, and the Code of Ethics that includes the 2003 Convention as international legislation that needs to be taken into account, to the UNESCO operational directives that foresee a role for museums, the overall results framework monitoring the global implementation and outcomes of the 2003 Convention, the 2015 UNESCO recommendation concerning the protection and promotion of museums and collections, their diversity and their role in society, with its inclusive, integrated perspective summing up all types of heritage equally and by repetition, to the increasing attention in Europe for social relevance of the IJIH paradigm in museum practice and policy, important to the European scope of the project we developed. But we also identified barriers that at times make it difficult for museums to truly engage with this living heritage and its practitioners. Many museums take their collections as a starting point for their work, while in the context of intangible heritage, you might think of placing the process of safeguarding practices of intangible heritage first. Investigating different aspects of these existent approaches more profoundly was an integral aspect of the project. However, what is more, throughout the project, also the potential of a third approach came to the fore. The more dialogical process between museums and intangible heritage, not favoring one approach over the other, but looking for mutual reinforcement for the sake of heritage care. Next to understanding that both museums and ICH practices could benefit from integrating elements of respectively applied methodologies for heritage care, it is relevant in this context to understand some of the barriers that impede the immersion of safeguarding ICH into museum practice and policy. From the relative intangibility of intangible heritage to the confusion that sometimes still exists in relation to the phrase, to the participatory aspects of ICH safeguarding that are not always straightforward, to the immense amount of tasks that museums are expected to perform today. Throughout the outcome materials of IMP, which include a book, executive summaries, a toolkit, and a declaration, the project brought forward a methodology at the interface of ICH and museums. This intersection methodology balances out the preservation approach, which is commonly applied in museums, and the safeguarding approach used in relation to ICH. But despite the conceptual differences between, generally speaking, more object-centered approach of museums and the emphasis on living intangible aspects in ICH safeguarding context, a comparative analysis of both gives rise to a range of fruitful intersections. They are situated in the center of the matrix you see here. It's the third space where mechanisms related to museum functions on the one hand and ICH safeguarding functions on the other hand find common ground and where new approaches are manifesting. These intersections are explained in more depth in the book we have published and will also be the subject of a tool we are developing in order to apply them in practice. And here you see some of the outputs we have produced. IMP started from a European context, namely from the experiences, the insights, and the case studies on the topic of ICH and museums from within its 5 partner countries, being Belgium, the Netherlands, Italy, France, and Switzerland. For the contribution to the journal, we have reflected on some more general insights in the context of safeguarding ICH in collaboration with museums. The first one relates to sustainable development. In the preamble of the 2003 UNESCO Convention, intangible heritage is cited as a guarantee for sustainable development. When pairing these aspects of sustainable development that are often embodied in ICH, so think of, for example, the domain of knowledge and practices relating to nature, with the powerful media communication of museums, solutions to pressing issues provided through intangible heritage can be spread more widely. The second one focuses on ethical questions and concerns. Among others, vivid debates about decolonizing collections and questions of restitution in Europe came to more prominence over the course of the project. In order to accommodate debates on these matters, the project actively endorsed a dialogical approach in which the voices of all actors and stakeholders are represented and acknowledged. We developed, for example, a tool that can help identify communities, groups, and individuals you would need to involve in your museum's work, and that can help decide on their level of participation, or a tool that encourages reflection on conducts and methods in the process of safeguarding. Somewhat in line with the previous is the insight on the power that lies in fostering learning networks and reciprocity. Through its events and reflections, the project had an impact on growing understanding, interfacing multiple perspectives and approaches, and by doing so, impacted the course of the heritage paradigm and heritage practice in a more general sense. The most tangible outcomes in which this is embodied is a declaration on the dynamic engagement between a multiplicity of actors from the fields of museums and intangible cultural heritage, which is undersigned by all partners that were involved in IMP. It provides a resume of our hopes and aspirations on the further course of collaborations in relation to ICH and museums. The project created, if not a free space, then at least a safe space by offering an experimental zone in which diverging, however institutionally adjacent communities of practice from museums and ICH within the larger heritage sector could explore the variety of approaches, interactions, and practices that come about and blossom when ICH and museums connect. It yielded enhanced relations of trust and reciprocity in a learning network revolving around the intertwinement of ICH and museums. This shared journey and experience of cooperation, encounter, and exchange unlocked the so-called third space and forged new learning partnerships across traditional boundaries, reconfiguring the landscape cooperatively. We hope that through reading the article as a whole, in which much more detail is provided on everything I hinted upon here, and by browsing the project website, you will find inspiration and you're triggered to reflect on new possibilities in relation to safeguarding intangible heritage, together with its practitioners and museums. Thank you for your attention.